It was a bright Monday morning at Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. People from different countries were rushing through the terminal, dragging suitcases, checking their tickets, and saying quick goodbyes. The sound of announcements mixed with the rolling of wheels and the chatter of travelers. Among all the noise and movement, one person walked calmly through the crowd, Officer Daniel. He had been working in airport security for almost 10 years. He was known for his quiet confidence and sharp eyes. But what made him even more respected was his partner Max, a large German shepherd with a shiny coat and loyal eyes. Max had been trained to detect things that most humans could never notice: the faintest smells, the smallest clues. Together, Daniel and Max had caught smugglers, found missing luggage, and even helped lost children. They were a team that trusted each other completely. That morning, like every day, Daniel patted Max's head before starting their routine walk near the customs area. "Let's do our job, buddy," he said with a smile. Max barked once softly, his tail wagging. As they walked through the inspection area, Daniel noticed families laughing, business travelers typing on their phones, and tourists taking photos. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and ordinary. But peace at airports can change in seconds, and Daniel had learned to trust his instincts, and Max's more than anything. Then it happened. Just as a line of passengers moved through the customs gate, Max suddenly stopped. His ears stood up and his body became tense. Daniel followed his gaze. A man, maybe in his 40s, was walking toward the exit with a large, dark suitcase. The man looked like any other tourist, wearing a light jacket, jeans, and a travel cap. But Max's reaction was unusual. The dog sniffed the air, then pulled on his leash toward the man. Daniel tried to hold him back, thinking it might be just a false reaction. But Max began barking, loud and sharp. Everyone nearby turned their heads. The barking echoed across the hall. Travelers stopped moving, and some even stepped back. The man with the suitcase froze in place, his face pale. Daniel called Max's name, but the dog wouldn't stop. His barking grew more intense, directed straight at the suitcase. Other officers quickly moved closer, ready to assist if needed. Daniel gently raised his hand to the crowd, signaling them to stay calm. He approached the man slowly, keeping his voice polite and controlled. "Sir," Daniel said, "please step aside for a quick check." The man nodded nervously. His accent revealed he wasn't local, perhaps from Eastern Europe. He tried to smile, but it was shaky. "Just clothes," he said, pointing at the suitcase. "Only clothes, nothing wrong." Daniel kept his expression neutral. "That's all right, sir. We just need to make sure everything is fine. Please come with us." As they moved to the inspection area, Max continued to bark softly, still focused on the luggage. The crowd whispered among themselves. Some people thought it was another case of drug smuggling. Others guessed it might be food or something restricted. A few took out their phones, pretending to scroll but secretly recording. Daniel noticed everything, though his attention never left the man and his suitcase. The man's hands shook as he placed the suitcase on the table. His breathing was uneven and sweat appeared on his forehead. "It's okay, sir," Daniel said calmly. "Take your time." But the man's nervousness didn't fade. His eyes moved from Max to the officers, then back to his suitcase. He fumbled with the zipper, then stopped and looked up. "Please," he whispered, "nothing dangerous." Daniel nodded slightly. "I understand. But we need to open it." The man hesitated again. His fingers trembled as he finally pulled the zipper open halfway. Max's barking stopped for a second, then began again, quieter this time but filled with urgency. Daniel leaned closer, trying to see inside. He noticed layers of cloth neatly folded, but there was something strange, a small bump under the clothes that seemed to move slightly. "Sir," Daniel said, his tone now serious but still gentle, "what's inside these clothes?" The man swallowed hard. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Finally, he whispered, "It's not what you think." Before Daniel could ask again, Max let out a low growl and sat down beside the table, staring at the suitcase with his head tilted. Daniel had seen that look before. It wasn't aggression. It was alertness mixed with confusion, as if Max sensed something living but harmless. The room had grown silent. Every sound of the airport, near the announcements, the chatter, the rolling wheels, and seemed to fade. Even the crowd outside the inspection area was holding its breath. Daniel slowly reached toward the suitcase, gently lifting one of the top shirts aside. The man quickly stopped him, holding his hand up. "Please, wait," he said, his voice breaking. Daniel looked him in the eye. "Is there something alive in here?" he asked quietly. The man looked down, his face full of guilt. He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. At that moment, Daniel's heart softened slightly. He had seen fear before, the kind that comes from being caught doing something wrong. But this was different. This was the look of someone scared not for himself, but for something else. Daniel didn't open the bag completely yet. Instead, he stood back and took a deep breath. "We'll take this slowly," he said to his team. "Let's keep calm." Another officer came forward with a translator, and soon they began asking gentle questions. The man said his name was Victor. He had come from a small town in Eastern Europe to visit a friend in London. He had all his documents, his ticket, and everything seemed in order, except for what was inside that suitcase. Victor's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the bag. "Please," he said softly. "No harm." Daniel looked at Max, who had now stopped barking completely. The dog's posture relaxed, his tail moving slowly as he sniffed the air again. It was as if Max was sensing no danger anymore, only sadness. The whole moment felt strange, quiet, emotional, and heavy. Daniel knew they had to check the bag officially, but something deep inside him told him that whatever was inside wasn't meant to hurt anyone. It was something else, something that touched the dog's instincts in a different way. As Victor stood there trembling, Daniel noticed the way his eyes kept glancing at the suitcase with deep concern. It wasn't the look of a criminal. It was the look of a man worried about someone he loved. Max moved closer to Victor, sniffing the air near his leg, then looked up at him quietly. For a brief second their eyes met, and something changed. Victor's shoulders dropped slightly, as if realizing that these people were not here to punish him but to help. Daniel spoke again, this time with warmth. "Sir, we just need to know what's inside." "I promise no one will hurt you or anything else. But we must see it." Victor nodded slowly. His fingers touched the zipper again. He closed his eyes, whispered something in his language, maybe a prayer, and slowly began to open the suitcase. The air felt thick with tension. The officers around leaned in. Travelers nearby watched silently from a distance. Daniel's heartbeat quickened, but his face stayed calm. Max stood perfectly still, his head slightly tilted, his eyes fixed on the opening of the bag. And just as Victor unzipped the bag fully, a faint sound came from inside. Not mechanical, not chemical, but something soft and alive. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Max, who wagged his tail once. Victor pressed his hand on his chest and whispered again, his eyes full of tears. Daniel didn't say a word. He just nodded, signaling that they would open it fully in the next step. But deep down, he already knew. This was not the kind of discovery he had expected that morning. It was something far more human, something that would soon move everyone in that airport. Victor stood still, his hands shaking as he looked down at the half-open suitcase. The airport lights reflected off his pale face. Around him, several officers waited quietly. The crowd behind the barrier had gone silent, their eyes fixed on the scene. Max, the police dog, sat beside Officer Daniel, alert but calm now. He wasn't barking anymore, only watching with soft eyes, his head slightly tilted. Daniel could feel the weight of the moment. The whole place was holding its breath. "Go ahead, sir," Daniel said gently. "You can open it." Victor swallowed hard. His fingers moved slowly over the zipper. He opened it wider, but not completely. His lips were trembling, and he whispered something in his language again, as if asking for strength. Daniel noticed the tears forming in his eyes. He wasn't looking like a criminal. He looked more like a man carrying too much fear and guilt. "Is there something alive inside?" Daniel asked again, keeping his tone calm. Victor nodded slightly but didn't speak. He looked scared, like someone who wanted to protect something precious but didn't know how anymore. One of the other officers stepped closer, ready to help. But Daniel raised his hand, stopping him. He didn't want to frighten Victor more than he already was. "It's all right," Daniel said softly. "You can trust us." Finally, Victor pulled the last bit of zipper open. He hesitated for a second, then gently lifted the top layer of folded clothes. The crowd leaned forward, trying to see what was inside. A faint sound came out, a soft whimper. It was so quiet that at first people thought they imagined it. Then came another small cry. It was high-pitched, weak, and full of fear. Daniel's eyes widened a little. He stepped closer and looked inside the suitcase. Beneath the clothes, wrapped in a small blanket, was something moving. Victor's eyes filled with tears. "Please," he said, "no hurt." Daniel slowly knelt down and pulled the blanket back just enough to see. There, lying curled up, was a small puppy, thin, trembling, and tired. It blinked in the light, confused and frightened. Its tiny nose twitched as it sniffed the air. For a moment, no one moved. Even Max, the trained K9, stood completely still. The sight shocked everyone. The officers looked at each other, unable to speak. Some of the travelers gasped quietly. The puppy was alive but weak, its fur matted and its breathing slow. It looked like it had been inside the suitcase for many hours. Daniel's heart ached at the sight. He turned to Victor. "You brought this dog with you?" Victor nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I had no choice." Daniel looked confused. "Why would you hide it?" "You could have told the airline." Victor shook his head. "No money. They said too expensive. I can't leave him." His English was broken, but the meaning was clear. He began to explain slowly, using both words and hand gestures. The officers listened quietly. The puppy, he said, was not just any animal. It was a stray he had found back in his village. It had been abandoned by the road, weak and nearly dead. Victor had taken it home, fed it, and cared for it for weeks. It slept beside his bed and followed him everywhere. He named it Luca. When he got the chance to travel to London for work, he couldn't bear to leave Luca behind. He feared that if he left the little dog there, it would die on the streets. His voice broke as he continued. "I hide him. In clothes. I make small hole in bag for air. I just want him safe." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the small animal again, its tiny chest rising and falling weakly. This man had risked everything, not to smuggle drugs or money, but to save a life. Another officer whispered, "This could have gone very wrong. The dog could have died in there." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but look at him." He didn't mean harm. The airport vet was quickly called to the scene. Within minutes, a woman wearing a white coat arrived with a small medical kit. She gently lifted the puppy out of the suitcase, wrapped it in a towel, and checked its heartbeat. "He's dehydrated but alive," she said softly. "He'll be okay if we give him fluids." Victor clasped his hands together in relief, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." Tears streamed down his face. The crowd that had gathered nearby began murmuring again, but this time the tone had changed. Some people smiled softly, others wiped their eyes. The tense air was gone. Even the officers standing around seemed touched. Daniel looked at Max, who had stepped closer to the small puppy. The big German shepherd sniffed the towel, then wagged his tail lightly as if approving what had happened. The vet gave the puppy a few drops of water. It moved its tiny paw weakly, then nestled into the towel, finally relaxing. Victor couldn't stop crying. He kept saying sorry to everyone. To Daniel, to the vet, to the staff. "I do wrong thing," he said in his broken English, but I love him. He's small, he alone. I can't leave him." Daniel placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. "I understand. You made a mistake, but not a bad one." Victor nodded, his voice barely audible. "I was afraid. I think you take him away forever." Daniel sighed. "Rules exist for safety, but sometimes hearts speak louder." He gave Victor a small, tired smile. The vet finished checking the puppy and handed it back to Victor carefully. "Keep him warm," she said kindly. "He's going to need rest." Victor held the puppy close, cradling it like a baby. Luca licked his chin weakly, and the man smiled through tears. It was a small moment, but everyone around felt something in their chest, that quiet reminder that kindness still existed even in the middle of strict rules and busy lives. The airport supervisor arrived soon after. She was serious but fair. She reviewed the situation and listened to Daniel's report. After a long pause, she said, "We'll document this as a violation, but there's no need for arrest. The man acted out of compassion, not crime." Victor looked up in surprise. "No jail?" he asked, his eyes wide. The supervisor smiled softly. "No jail, but next time, do it the right way." Victor nodded many times, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." The vet arranged for the puppy to stay overnight in an animal care center to recover before being released. Victor was allowed to visit later in the day. As the officers began clearing the area, Daniel noticed people smiling and whispering kind words. A little girl who had been watching with her mother stepped forward and said shyly, "Mister, your dog is very brave." Victor smiled at her, his eyes wet. "He is small but strong," he said. Daniel watched him walk away with the vet and another officer, his shoulders lighter now, his steps slow but peaceful. Max walked beside Daniel quietly. The dog looked up as if expecting praise. Daniel chuckled softly and patted his head. "Good job, partner," he said. "You were right again." As they walked away from the inspection area, Daniel thought about how close this had come to being a tragedy. Not because of a crime, but because of love. Sometimes the line between right and wrong wasn't clear. Sometimes it was just a matter of heart. That evening, when Daniel returned to the staff lounge, some of his colleagues were still talking about it. "You see that man's face?" one said. "I thought he was hiding something terrible. Turns out he was hiding hope." Daniel smiled at that. He sat down, tired but thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "our job isn't just to catch danger. It's to understand people." Outside the window, planes continued to take off into the cloudy sky. Life at the airport returned to normal. Announcements, travelers, luggage, all moving again. But for Daniel, the image of that small trembling puppy would stay in his heart for a long time. And somewhere in a corner of the airport's animal care unit, the same puppy was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, safe, warm, and loved. The airport seemed quieter than usual after the strange incident that morning. Though the announcements continued and planes took off as always, something about the atmosphere had changed. The story of the man with the hidden puppy was already spreading among staff and travelers. People whispered softly about it in the cafes, at the boarding gates, and in the waiting lounges. Many called it the sweetest thing that ever happened at customs. Officer Daniel sat at his desk finishing his report. Max, the German shepherd, rested at his feet, his tail tapping the floor lightly. Daniel looked at his partner and smiled. "You've got a heart just as big as your nose," he said quietly. Max looked up with his calm brown eyes as if he understood every word. Just then, one of the younger officers walked over. "Sir, the man, Victor, is still in the office with the vet. They're checking on the dog again. Thought you might want to come." Daniel nodded and stood up. He adjusted his uniform and followed down the hall. When he entered the small examination room, he saw Victor sitting on a bench holding the puppy in his lap. The little creature looked cleaner now, wrapped in a small towel, its eyes half open. The vet, a kind woman named Dr. Leah, was giving it some water with a dropper. "How's the little one?" Daniel asked softly. Dr. Leah smiled. "Much better. Still weak, but he'll make it. A few more hours of rest and fluids, and he'll start wagging his tail again." Victor looked up at Daniel with tears in his eyes. "He live?" Daniel nodded. "He's a fighter. Just like you, I guess." Victor let out a small laugh, the first one since he arrived. It was shaky but full of relief. He looked down at the puppy and stroked its tiny head. "He is my only friend," he said. "When I find him, he is small and cold. No one want him. I give him milk from my hand. I sleep with him near fire. I cannot leave him alone when I come here. He look at me like I am his world." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He thought about how many times he had seen people treat animals like objects, but this man was different. His love for the little creature was pure and selfless. He wasn't trying to break the law for money or gain, only to keep his friend safe. Dr. Leah nodded gently. "You did something risky, Victor, but I can see why you did it. You saved him once before. You just didn't know there was a safer way to bring him here." Victor lowered his head, ashamed. "I was afraid. The airport, the people, the rules. I think they take him away." Daniel placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You were scared, but your heart was in the right place. We understand." A few minutes later, the airport supervisor entered. Her name was Officer Karen, and though she usually had a strict expression, today her eyes were softer. She had already read the full report. "Mr. Victor," she said, "you put the puppy in danger, but you didn't mean harm. We've decided not to press any charges. You'll receive a warning and some papers to sign. After that, you can take him home once he's cleared by the vet." Victor's mouth fell open. "Really? No jail?" Karen shook her head. "No jail. Just rules you'll need to follow next time. And maybe a promise that you'll never hide him again." Victor stood quickly and held the puppy close. "I promise," he said with tears in his eyes. "Thank you. Thank you all." Even Max, sitting by Daniel's side, seemed to sense the good energy in the room. The big dog wagged his tail and leaned closer to sniff the little puppy again. Luca, as Victor called him, made a tiny squeak in response. The sight made everyone in the room smile. Later that afternoon, word about the event reached the airport lounge. Travelers who had been waiting during the morning were still talking about it. Some said they had never seen officers handle a situation so kindly. A mother told her little daughter, "See, that's why honesty matters. The truth always finds a way." The girl nodded, holding her teddy bear tighter. Meanwhile, Daniel finished signing the final forms. When he walked back to check on Victor, he found the man sitting near the animal care desk, writing something on a small notepad. He looked up and smiled when Daniel approached. "I write story for my son," he explained in his rough English. "He's small boy. He love dog too." Daniel sat beside him for a moment. "You have a son?" "Yes," Victor said softly. "He is 6. He stay with my sister until I find work. I want to bring him here one day." Daniel smiled. "I think your boy will be proud of what you did. You showed him that kindness doesn't need money or rules, just heart." Victor nodded slowly. "Maybe one day Luca and my boy play together." The thought made Daniel's chest feel warm. He could imagine the little boy running around with the puppy, laughing freely under an open sky, a simple, honest happiness that needed no words. That evening, as the airport lights turned golden, Dr. Leah came out again. "He's doing well," she said cheerfully. "Eating a little now. I think he'll be ready to leave in the morning." Victor smiled in gratitude. He turned to Daniel and said, "You and your dog, and you both save him." "I never forget," Daniel chuckled. "It's all Max, he's the real hero." At the sound of his name, Max wagged his tail proudly. Victor laughed and reached down to pat the big dog's head. Max accepted it with calm grace, his eyes soft and gentle. When Victor was taken to a small waiting area for the night, Daniel returned to the K9 office. Some of the staff were still talking about what had happened. One of them showed a short video someone had posted online, a traveler who had recorded part of the moment when the suitcase was opened. The video had already gathered hundreds of likes. The caption read, "Police dog saves another dog, the airport that stopped for love." Daniel watched it quietly. He saw himself standing beside Max the moment when the blanket moved, and the look on Victor's face when the puppy was found. It was raw, emotional, and real. People in the comments were writing things like, "Faith in humanity restored," and "That officer's dog deserves a medal." He smiled and turned off the screen. He didn't care about the attention. What mattered was that a small life had been saved. Before heading home, Daniel went to check on Victor one last time. The man was sitting in the resting area, fast asleep with his hand resting on the crate beside him. Inside the crate, Luca was curled up, sleeping peacefully. For the first time since arriving, both looked calm, a man and his little companion, finally safe. Daniel watched them quietly for a moment. He didn't wake him. He simply placed a small note beside Victor's hand. The note read, "Welcome to London, Victor. You and Luca are both brave souls. Take care of each other." The next morning when Victor woke up, he found the note. He smiled, tears shining in his tired eyes. He looked at Luca, who wagged his tiny tail weakly. "We are safe now," he whispered. "Good people still exist." Later, when Victor and Luca walked out of the airport's exit gate, Daniel and Max were standing nearby. Daniel gave him a small wave, and Victor waved back with both hands. Luca barked softly from his arms. The sunlight outside was warm and bright, and as they stepped into it, it felt like a new beginning. For all of them. Daniel watched them disappear into the crowd. Max leaned against his leg, and Daniel scratched behind his ears. "You did a good thing today, buddy," he said quietly. "Sometimes heroes wear fur." Max looked up and licked Daniel's hand. The officer smiled and turned back toward his post, feeling proud not for catching someone, but for understanding someone. And somewhere in that big, busy airport, amid all the noise, rushing people and flashing lights, a small act of kindness had reminded everyone watching that love, in its purest form, still travels across every border. Morning sunlight poured softly through the large glass windows of Heathrow Airport. Planes were taking off one after another, their engines roaring in the distance. Inside the customs office, everything was calm again, but something had changed in the hearts of those who worked there. The story of the hidden puppy had spread everywhere, from officers to cleaning staff. Everyone had heard about the man who carried a small life in his suitcase out of love, not crime. Officer Daniel walked into the terminal with his loyal partner Max walking beside him. Max's steps were steady, his ears alert but relaxed. Daniel smiled when he saw the dog glance up at him. "Ready for another day, partner?" he asked softly. Max barked once as if saying yes. When Daniel reached the inspection office, he saw Victor sitting near the desk with the small puppy in his arms. The animal looked much healthier now. Its fur was brushed and it wore a small temporary collar with a tag from the airport vet. The little creature wagged its tiny tail when it saw Daniel and Max. "Good morning," Daniel said warmly. "You both look better." Victor stood up quickly, smiling through his tired eyes. "Yes, Luca eat now. He drink water. He sleep good. Doctor say he okay." Dr. Leah, the veterinarian, stepped forward holding a few papers. "He's strong now," she said. "A few more days of care and he'll be perfectly fine. He's lucky to have such a devoted owner." Victor's smile faded a little as he looked at the officers around him. He knew there was still a decision to be made about what would happen next. Rules were rules and he had broken them, even if his heart had been pure. The airport supervisor, Officer Karen, arrived a few minutes later, carrying a folder in her hand. She was a woman of discipline, always calm but firm. Everyone stood as she entered the room. She placed the folder on the desk and took a deep breath. "Mr. Victor," she began, her voice polite but serious, "we've gone through your case carefully. What you did was against airport and customs regulations. Bringing any living animal without a permit is illegal, especially inside luggage. Normally this could lead to heavy fines or even detainment." Victor lowered his head. He hugged the puppy closer, afraid those words meant bad news. The room grew silent again. Even Max seemed to sense the tension. He sat quietly beside Daniel, watching the man closely. "But," Karen continued, her voice softening, "we also recognize that your actions were driven by compassion, not wrongdoing. Officer Daniel's report and Dr. Leah's testimony both confirm that you acted out of love and desperation, not greed or harm. So we've decided to handle this differently." Victor looked up slowly, hope flickering in his eyes. "Different?" he asked in his broken English. Karen nodded gently. "You won't be charged or detained. Instead, you'll sign a formal warning, and we'll help you register your puppy properly through the correct channels. We'll also arrange temporary care for Luca until you find a safe place to stay in London." Victor's lips trembled. He didn't know what to say. His hands shook as he looked from Karen to Daniel and then to Dr. Leah. You help me?" he asked, as if still not believing it. Daniel smiled. "Yes, Victor. You're not a criminal. You're just someone who cared too much to walk away." Tears rolled down Victor's cheeks. He wiped them quickly with the back of his hand, embarrassed. "I thank you. All of you. I never forget this." He looked down at Luca, who wagged his tail as if understanding the happiness around him. Karen handed him the paper to sign. "This is just to confirm you understand the rules for next time," she said kindly. Victor nodded and signed his name carefully in shaky handwriting. When he finished, Karen reached into her bag and placed something on the desk, a small blue tag. "This is a travel permit," she explained. "You'll need to attach it to Luca's collar once we finalize his papers. It means he's officially approved to travel in the country." Victor held the tag carefully as if it were made of gold. "Thank you," he whispered. "I promise I follow rule now." The room lightened again. Everyone relaxed, smiling. Even Max gave a short bark, making Victor laugh. Luca barked back, a tiny squeaky sound that made the officers chuckle. Dr. Leah took Luca in her arms for a moment and said, "You're a brave little traveler. But next time, no suitcase adventures, all right?" Everyone laughed softly at her gentle joke. After all the forms were signed, Daniel offered to walk Victor to the main exit. As they walked through the wide halls of the airport, people still pointed quietly. Many recognized the man from the earlier commotion, but now, instead of suspicious glances, he received warm smiles. Some even clapped softly or whispered kind words as he passed. A young woman carrying a coffee cup stopped and said, "Is that the man with the puppy? Oh my God, I read about him online this morning. What a story." Daniel smiled politely and kept walking. Victor, shy and humble, looked down, holding Luca close. "People know?" he asked nervously. Daniel nodded. "Yes, someone shared a video. It's all over social media now." They're calling it the day love barked louder than rules. Victor blinked in surprise. People not angry? No, Daniel said with a small laugh. They're inspired. You reminded them that love still matters. When they reached the exit, Victor stopped and looked out through the glass doors. Outside, London was cloudy but bright. He turned to Daniel and said quietly, I come here to find work, maybe small job, clean place, anything. I have little money, but I have hope now. You and your friends give me that. Daniel felt a lump in his throat again. He didn't want to make a big speech, so he simply said, Take care of Luca, that's the best thanks you can give us. Victor nodded, holding Luca close to his chest. The puppy licked his chin and he laughed softly. Max sat beside Daniel, watching the two with calm eyes, his tail moving slowly. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. A silent connection between humans and animals, between fear and kindness, between rules and mercy. Then the supervisor, Karen, walked up behind them. Mr. Victor, she said, one more thing. He turned around quickly. Yes, ma'am? She handed him a small envelope. A little something from the airport staff. It's not much, but we wanted to help you get started. Victor hesitated, not wanting to take it, but she insisted. Please, think of it as a welcome gift. He finally accepted it with shaking hands and bowed his head. I don't know what to say, he whispered. I never think people so kind. Daniel smiled. Sometimes kindness is stronger than law. Victor smiled back, eyes full of tears but shining with peace. He looked at Max and said, You are good dog. You bark, but you saved my friend. Thank you. Max tilted his head and wagged his tail again. After a few more goodbyes, Victor stepped outside the doors. The cool London air touched his face. He took a deep breath and whispered, We are free, Luca, we are safe. The little puppy barked softly as if agreeing. Together they walked toward the train station, disappearing into the crowd of travelers. Daniel stood there for a long time, watching them go. Karen walked up beside him and said, You did the right thing, Daniel. Not every situation needs punishment. Sometimes people just need understanding. Daniel nodded. I think Max taught us that today. Karen smiled. Maybe we should give him a medal. Daniel looked down at his partner. He wouldn't wear it anyway, he said with a chuckle. As they turned to head back inside, a few more travelers approached to thank the officers for how they handled things. It wasn't every day that people saw compassion win in such a strict place. Later, when Daniel finished his shift, he took Max for a walk outside near the parking lot. The evening air was cool and the sky was painted orange by the setting sun. Max walked quietly beside him, stopping once to look up as if remembering the little puppy. You miss him, huh? Daniel said with a smile. Don't worry. I think we'll hear from them again. And he was right, because kindness once given never really disappears. It finds its way back. Sometimes in the form of a letter, sometimes in a memory, and sometimes in a wagging tail that reminds you of a day when love, not fear, made the whole airport stop and listen. A few weeks passed since the day the airport froze in silence over a barking police dog and a man's mysterious suitcase. Life at Heathrow had gone back to its usual rhythm. Flights arriving, travelers rushing, and officers doing their duties. But for Officer Daniel, that morning had left something deep inside his heart that he couldn't quite forget. Every time he walked past the customs area, he remembered Victor's trembling hands, the tiny puppy's weak whimper, and the way the whole place had turned from fear to compassion within minutes. Max, his loyal German shepherd, seemed to remember too. Some mornings, as they passed the same spot where it all began, Max would stop for a moment, sniff the air, and look around as if searching for that small puppy again. Daniel would smile and pat his head. He's fine, buddy, he would say softly. They're both fine. One chilly morning, about a month later, Daniel walked into the office and found a small cardboard box sitting on his desk. There was a white envelope attached to it with his name written in careful handwriting, to Officer Daniel and K9 Max. The writing was uneven but gentle, as if written by someone who wasn't used to writing in English but had put their whole heart into it. Daniel looked around the room. Did someone drop this off? He asked another officer. The younger man nodded. Yeah, it came through the mailroom this morning. No return address, just says it's from Victor. Sound familiar? Daniel smiled instantly. Very much. He sat down, carefully opened the envelope first, and began to read the letter inside. The handwriting was shaky but clear enough to understand. Dear Officer Daniel and brave dog Max, I hope you remember me. My name is Victor, and I am the man you helped that day at the airport. I write this letter to tell you that I am safe and working now. I have a small job in a bakery. The people are kind. I rent a small room and I am saving money. Luca is healthy and strong. The doctors say he will live a long time. Every day he run in the small park near my home. He make all children laugh. People in my street call him the miracle dog from the airport. He become famous here too. I want to thank you and your dog, Max. You did not see a bad man. You see a man with fear but love in his heart. You and your team give me chance to start again. For that, I thank you from my soul. Luca also want to thank you. So I send some pictures inside the box. One of them is special. Please keep it. Your friend always, Victor. Daniel paused for a moment, his throat tightening as he read the last line. Max stood beside him, tail wagging as if sensing something good. Slowly, Daniel opened the box. Inside, there were several photographs neatly stacked together. The first photo showed Victor standing in front of a small bakery with a sign that read, Sunny Loaf. He was wearing an apron. Smiling proudly, and beside him sat Luca, now clean, bright-eyed and wearing a red collar. His tail was a blur of motion. The next photo showed Luca running through a small park surrounded by children laughing and playing. In one picture, he was chasing bubbles. In another, he was sitting beside an elderly woman on a bench, his head resting on her lap. But the last photo was the one that made Daniel's heart melt completely. It was a picture of Luca sitting proudly next to a small drawing pinned on a wall. The drawing showed a big dog and a little dog sitting together under a blue sky. Above them, in a child's handwriting, it said, Max and Luca, heroes with kind hearts. At the bottom of the box was a small blue tag, the same kind of travel permit tag the airport had given Victor weeks ago. But now it had been polished and turned into a keychain. A tiny note was attached to it. To Max, because he found a life, not danger. Daniel couldn't stop smiling. He reached down and showed it to Max. Look at that, boy. You've got mail. Max barked happily, his tail wagging hard enough to hit the chair. A few of Daniel's coworkers gathered around, curious about what was happening. When Daniel showed them the photos and read the letter aloud, the whole room went quiet for a moment. Then soft smiles spread across every face. That's beautiful, said one of the officers quietly. You don't get stories like that every day. Dr. Leah came by the office later that afternoon. Daniel showed her the letter too. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she looked at the pictures. He looked so happy, she said softly. I'm glad we gave him a chance. Yeah, Daniel said, looking at Max. We all did the right thing that day. That evening, before going home, Daniel decided to hang one of the photos on the wall near the K-9 training area, the one with the drawing that said Max and Luca, heroes with kind hearts. The other officers agreed, saying it would remind everyone why compassion was as important as duty. The story didn't end there. Over the next few months, small updates from Victor continued to arrive once in a while, short letters, sometimes with photos, sometimes just a line or two. He always thanked them for changing his life. One letter even mentioned that Luca had started helping an elderly neighbor who was afraid to go outside alone. He walk with her every morning, Victor wrote. He make her smile. He help her more than I can. Each letter made Daniel proud. Each one reminded him that one small act of kindness could create waves far beyond what anyone could see. One day, near Christmas, the airport staff decided to put together a small charity display with real stories from officers who had shown acts of kindness. Daniel was asked to share his. At first he hesitated, he didn't want attention, but then he thought of Victor's words. You see a man with love in his heart, so he agreed. The display showed a large photo of Max with the headline, The Dog Who Barked at Love. Under it was a short paragraph telling the story of how a police dog's instinct led to saving a hidden puppy and changing a man's life. People passing through the airport stopped to read it, some smiling, some even tearing up. Children pointed at Max's photo and said things like, Look, that's the dog who saved another dog. On Christmas Eve, as Daniel finished his shift, he walked outside with Max to watch the snow fall. Lights twinkled across the airport buildings and holiday music played faintly in the background. Daniel rubbed Max's fur and said quietly, You know, buddy, this job isn't just about stopping bad things. Sometimes it's about helping good things survive. Max wagged his tail and leaned against his leg, his warm eyes looking up with pure trust. As Daniel and Max stood there under the falling snow, the world felt peaceful, not because everything was perfect, but because kindness had once again proven stronger than fear. Somewhere across the city, Victor and Luca were probably doing the same, watching the lights, sharing a small meal, and feeling thankful for strangers who had become friends. And though airports are places where people come and go, sometimes they also become places where hearts meet, even for just a moment, and change each other's lives forever.